Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. All right, ladies, welcome back. So today we have with us Dr. Gertrude, who stands at the forefront of coaching and education in holistic women's development, parenting, self-love, and relationship fulfillment. As the visionary behind Rewrite the Mother Code, she inspires women to embark on their unique paths of personal transformation, drawing on her over 25 plus years of experience in empowering individuals, couples, parents, and families towards fulfillment and living their best lives. So whether you are a mother or a business owner or somewhere in between, this podcast episode is going to be your jam. So welcome, Dr. Gertrude.
Thank you, Rachel. It's such a pleasure and honor to be on the show today.
Absolutely. And of course, we can read our bios and you got such an incredible story and you have so much on deck. And I'm just so excited for our conversation. But I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit more about you and the backstory and what led you into the works that you do today.
Thanks. Because, when we look at our resumes or something like that, it's like, wait, you went from a finance and accounting major to an economic analyst to coaching? Like, how did that happen? But really, the short story was really starting on my own journey of growth and development very early on when my husband and I got engaged. We got engaged in 1989. We're coming up on our 35th wedding anniversary. My boss at the time, when I was working as an economic analyst, he's like, here I am, newly engaged, coming into our little office. And I'm like, I'm engaged. He's like, best advice I can give you is to do pre-marital counseling, because he was going through a divorce. So he wasn't real keen on marriage at the moment. But it was great advice. And somehow, despite that not being my world at all, or even knowing anything about coaching, wasn't really a thing then. So it literally was couples therapy, counseling, that there was just something that clicked, right? We both came from divorced parents, alcoholism in our systems, affairs, it didn't take much to look at. And I haven't even really explored, but just even a little bit of a reflection would say, wow, if these were the people I spent my life with and learned about relationship, I bet there's things that we could learn. And I really don't want to end up how they ended up. So, and then second miracle was my husband, after a lot of skepticism and kind of he came, and we had just a really moving, beautiful experience of, wow, like this will be really helpful. Set a vision for our marriage, start exploring our family dynamics. And so that, we both ended up from that moment, varying degrees over the years in the coaching world, right? So in that, like, it really makes sense. And that's what this couples coach said, I'll support you through your wedding. That'll be the kickoff to your marriage. And then really the best thing you can do is work on yourself, right? And do your own deep work, your own, work and therapy. And we did, and there have been ebbs and flows, but I can promise you, Rachel, we would not be married had we not. Like, those patterns were so strong. And we like to think like, oh, it'll be different. I love this guy. He's amazing. We like it was all waiting just waiting to happen, right? That kind of wiring and programming that we get. And even in the best of circumstances, no family's perfect. There's always some level of dysfunction, and that's okay, right? Like, I know my husband and I joke, well, we'll start a college fund for our kids, but we'll also set up a therapy coaching fund as well. Because listen, like, even with as far as we got in the kind of work that we did, there's no way I would sit there and say we did anything perfectly. We had, a lot of room for improvement, but they can stand on our shoulders and hopefully break some, generational trauma patterns, and that was our hope. So as I was continuing in that world, in my economic analyst world, just kept doing my own work, but then, started supporting other people. And that was the part of my job that I liked because believe it or not, like even as this economic analyst, I was working with people in personal injury and wrongful death and experiences. And I like talking to them. I was kind of sideline coaching in some ways, sharing what I was learning and stuff. So I ended up pivoting after my second daughter was born. I took time off and then decided to, really start pursuing more of that personal supporting me, going directly into that. So 2 master's degrees and a doctorate focusing on first one was focusing on family, maximizing the potential in a family, couple and a family. But my doctorate, then I decided to pursue, that was really about, because when I became a mother, I started out like, wow, this is going to be an amazing experience because it's going to stir up so much great work for me and I'm going to keep developing myself. And I did for about a little ways into my second daughter being born. And then I was like, I just avoided it. There were things that went on, and that's something I share about and write about in my book. But it's there's such beautiful journeys, and I just wanted to support people, women, in having a transformational opportunity in mothering, which then led me to expand the definition of mothering to include all women, right? Because I realized, really strongly as I was studying and working on my doctorate that, wait a sec, like, this isn't just about women and children. And yes, that's its own unique experience for sure. Just like if someone's never started in their own business or been an entrepreneur, like that's its own unique experience, right? And you know that from your experience. But there's so much crossover. There's so much more similar than dissimilar because the minute you have employees or people on a team, they're your children, you're nurturing a business. We talked ahead of time about writing books, and I can promise you that is such a parallel journey to birthing a child. So I really wanted women to see how we connect, how much more alike than different we are, and to stop siloing ourselves or judging each other for our choices in mothering and really claim that we all do it and how can we support each other. So that's the long, short version.
I love it because you've really given us a well-rounded version of your experiences and just your passion in your heart and why you do what you do. And I think that that goes through with all the works that you do. I mean, you have this book that is all about feminism and mothering and bringing that into light and talking about rewrite the mother code. That's like through this evolution of your own experiences and recognizing that motherhood isn't just for those that have birthed children, but it's for all women. And I wrote that down and I was just like, wow, that's so profound because, how many of us look at our life and just feel whether or not you have children, am I a mother? Or maybe you've created businesses, and does that mean that you are not a mother of a business? And so I think from my perspective, where you really touch upon, and we talked about this before we hit record, is that for me personally, I've always felt kind of inadequate. Like I wasn't equipped because I did not birth a human child. But yet when I get asked that question, are you a mom? And I almost feel like this little bit of me kind of sinks. Like, no, I'm not. But I'm a cat mom of 3 and I have multiple businesses and a husband who sometimes feels like a child. And, it's like we got all of these things, even mothering ourselves. So, and I think that
Oh,
that's
you hit it.
yes, right? Because it's like our attention and our love and our nurturing and all the things that go into, if you want to just put it from mothering children, go into all those things. And you talked about with teams and your employees. And so we have so much to give. And it feels like with women, is it ever enough, right? Like this, I don't know about you, but sometimes it just feels like you give too much, but is it too much or is it not enough? Because it's like what it feels like inside if we get that joy and that validity in knowing that our love and our nurturing and all those things that are mothering are going towards the right things. And I think that that's something to definitely think about too. But yeah, you're the queen here of motherhood. And I would just take on that.
You touched on something that, when I shared with it, you shared with you earlier about how we all mother, we conceive, create, give birth to, yes, children. That's one of the ways we literally can mother, but ideas, dreams, careers, pets, all of that. But the most important person we need to mother is ourselves. And I shared that I have a TEDx talk coming up, and it's really one of the points, like the idea that I really want to emphasize in that talk is it's evidence-based that, when women mother themselves, and I like saying it mothering with a capital M because I wanted to go beyond basic needs. There's certain things that, yes, we need baseline self-care, but this is, doing deep work and transformative work and courageous exploration. If spirituality is a big part of your life that you're really digging into, when we do that, everyone around us benefits. When we don't, actually they suffer, but we have this thousands of years of cultural wiring that really our job is to just give selflessly and just give of yourself and don't expect too much for you. And your reward is that the people around you have been so given to. And it doesn't prove out in the
Right.
data, right? It just doesn't, I mean, and you'll hear like cute sayings, and I do agree with them, happy mom, happy wife, happy life, happy, mother, happy, everyone, but we still don't believe it, right? Like it's just so wired in there. And I mean, I've had women mad at me like, no, that's not right. Like, no, my children have to come first, or my business comes first, or my husband comes first. Like, no, that's just selfish. That's selfish and wrong. Like almost like it's a sin, to do that. And I think, that shows how deep that wiring has been embedded for us. So to realize and you start having an experience of it, it's like, oh, I really took good care of myself this week. Look how, everyone's doing around me. My energy is contagious. I'm modeling, for those around me of self-care. Like there's so many positive attributes of it that it just it's one of those lies I would like to myths, I guess, lies in our culture that I would like to get rid of. I'm just gonna think of some more dramatic word, but explode or whatever. That
Yeah.
one's gotta die. It just has to die.
It does, it does, and it feels like sometimes, there's this expectation, and that's essentially what we're living up for, where it really
Mhm.
should be because, to your point, it's like the give, 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 and I think that that's sometimes where we feel so empty, but we give and what's to get back, and sometimes there's this discontentment involved too, and I
Mhm.
think that we have to be mindful of how we're giving and why
Mm.
we're giving, because if we're only
Yes.
giving
Yeah.
get, that's not really loving.
No.
No.
No. Yeah, for sure. And you said something earlier too about, is it ever enough? Like so often we can feel like we're giving and it doesn't feel like enough. And it's something I really like to support people in my coaching, and that is you get to define what enough is, whether that's setting a vision for yourself, your own goals, your own standards based on your values, based on what matters and is important to you and how you want to, design your life. That's what you measure against, right? Like, and if we can tune out culture and social media, so much that's
Yes.
trying to give us messages of, oh, look what she's doing. I'm supposed to do it like that. Or look what they're doing. And oh, I don't, that sinking feeling when someone asks if I have a child, even though, you can love your life. And I know women, couples who've consciously chosen not to, decided not to have children or tried and then couldn't, but then really made the choice like, this is how we're going to live our life. Yeah. Because there's sadness and pain in any choice that we make, right? Like I had a point at one point actually coaching a couple who were just really living into their life as their child-free life, right? And a choice that they had made, and just hearing them and the delight and the possibilities and the things that they were doing, I let myself fully feel the regret and remorse of the choice to have children, right? Because I'm like, wow, they take that choice has, its ups, and it's a tremendous amount of energy. It's a tremendous amount of your time, expense, and all of that. What else could I have birthed instead of children, right? And it felt people were like, "Oh my god, I can't you can't like say you regret having children." I'm like, I love my children, right? I love them. It's so different than letting yourself feel some of the pain of any choice that we make. I didn't win some award or make it across some special finish line because I was able to birth a couple beautiful daughters, right? Like that didn't put me ahead of anyone. It was a choice that we made, and we lived into that choice, and it has its own positives and challenges. So that was a big awareness kind of awakening for me around some of these choices. And that's what I really want to support women to do is make discerned choices. Some people are like, well, I wasn't sure if I wanted kids, so I kind of just let it time go by, and then that's fine. You can do that. But if you actually make it intentional choices around if I am, and you can change them down the line, but then you can fully live into whatever that choice is that you've made. Otherwise, we can doubt ourselves like, oh, I missed out or I should have done this. We want to really get rid of the should have in this equation.
Yeah. I
Uh,
know you've hit on so many topics, and I feel like we can spin this off in so many different angles. But one of the things I definitely want to talk about, or at least highlight here that you had mentioned, is it's not a regret of having children. And I want to thank you for saying that because
Mm.
I do not have human children, but in my friend circle, I'm always like the minority without children. I could see that through conversations, there's almost like this, they live vicariously through others as if that could have been their life. And,
Mm.
and I've done the opposite where I've vicariously lived through them and say, wow, if I had children, they could bring me so much joy and all these things, right? So it's like there's so many positives to either decision. But to your point, it's not about regret. It's just about that longing of what if you had chose door number one instead of door number two? And
Yep.
there's that curiosity. It's always wondering, like, did I pick the better door? Or could something have been out there better for me?
Mm.
And it's never to take away from your love of your own children or feel like
Oh,
you shouldn't have done that. And I don't ever want women to feel that way. But yes, allow yourself to feel and to explore because, as children grow up and become adults, there's still that opportunity now to go live that travel free laptop life or go on vacations and go here and go there. So now it's almost like you're getting the best of both without having to compromise. And I think with women, sometimes we feel like we have to compromise. And I disagree. I think that there's plenty to
totally.
go around. And I think that our time here is limited, but I feel like we can have the best of everything of what we want should we want to choose that route. Now, of course, with women, there's certain birthing age. And do you want to start a family later on in life? And it's not that it's ridding the option or the possibility, but there's always a choice. And I think that with women, we always have the choice of whatever we choose, but we shouldn't have any sort of regret or resentment for the choices we have made.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we might have feelings about choices at some point, letting those feelings be there when you realize, like, oh, I didn't have that. And like, I feel sad. But that nets out with like what I do have. Right. And sometimes I think we avoid that because we don't want to think we made the wrong choice, like you said. Really, I think what you're saying is there are no wrong choices. It's really how intentional are we with the choices that we're making? Are we living into goals or visions that we set for ourselves, and how am I doing with that? And even that's not a beat up. We don't want to, well, I said I was going to be, you know, here by such and such date and I'm not, we don't, we got to watch for that too, right? We can learn from, well, I guess geez, I either didn't really want that or, somehow I didn't intend it, but I don't have to beat myself up about it. I don't have to come down hard on myself. All right. Well, do I still want that? Let's reevaluate. Let's look at how I got here with what we have and how far I did get. We set some of those milestones just to give us guardrails, whichever, maybe both, just to give us checkpoints. And it's data, and that data does not have to have a demeaning aspect to it or say something about who we are as people or that making any of those judgment calls that we do.
Yes, agree. And, with one choice, there's always a choice after that. And so it's never finite. There's always ways around it. And so obviously you talk at great lengths about this in your book. And I would love for you to share some more with our listeners. But more importantly, what are the mother codes and what does it mean to rewrite them as part of your Rewrite the Mother Code is your business, is your brand? So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what that means.
Yeah, when I set out after my doctorate and when I did my doctorate, I really wanted, my intention with my study was to measure and see if I could raise a woman's awareness in the transformational opportunity in motherhood, right? Like, can I shift some myths or beliefs? Do women even know that that's possible? Or is it just about, oh, you're just supposed to be delighted to have had these little beings and raise them? And like you said, that's one of the codes that I write about is, you have a child and they're going to give you endless joy and fulfillment, right? So these things that either through our family or our culture that get wired in, right? So cultural ones tend that are and ones that are disempowering because there's things that are wired in that are beautiful from our families and our culture, right? And from the communities that we're in. So we're not talking about those, but some of the path in rewriting is making your own distinctions, right? Looking at ones, is this being curious? Is this okay, just because the whole world says I'm supposed to have a child, right? Or I'm not a woman. That's one of the codes that's written in us. And, that somehow determines my womanness is if I give birth to a child. Like that fulfills my purpose, right? That is a cultural code that came in through, I'm going to call it overly masculine values, kind of, patriarchal, where in a way that isn't healthy for us, that, puts women down a couple notches, right? And that like this is your purpose on earth is to just do this. So it's identifying those, right? So the process is how do I identify in my family if I just when I talked about noticing, immediately noticing patterns in both of our parents, it's that journey, right? It's looking at, oh, okay, what was I part of every day? What were what did my how was I mothered? How did it how d what was my perception of motherhood through my upbringing? And explore it. Look at what did I like? What didn't I like? What do I feel like worked? What didn't work? So that I could then create a vision for myself. I call that your mother code, like your rewritten mother code after, this however deep you want to go in this discernment. This could launch you into a whole healing process, which is what it did for me. I found it to be both super painful, messy, challenging, but so fulfilling. It really opens space for you to make choices that aren't just reactive to your parenting. Because when we don't look at some of that, then, you know, sometimes the best we can do is say, well, I know I don't want to do that, being raised this way. So I'm going to do it the exact opposite. Right. But when we can muddle through that, at whatever level and depth. And then, I'm not saying this statement is going to say it all for you, but it's a start, right? It's a you claiming what, what do I want my mothering path to look like? And that's where I make a distinction between motherhood and mothering, because we all mother and we're all doing whatever mothering we're doing. Motherhood, I think, just denotes so much the raising a child aspect that I'm not perfect about it, but I kind of try and keep a little bit of a distinction. Just that journey, that exploration. And then when we can make those choices, like, oh, and guess what? Some of the codes are about things that we just so take for granted as what is true and right. I do go into a fair amount about, really being curious and question. hospital practices for birth, if you decide to have children. Just because everyone does it a certain way doesn't mean it's, when you look at statistics, 98% of births in the US happen in hospitals, yet we have the highest mother and infant mortality rate of any developed country. Healthcare for mothers is the worst in our country of any developed country. I knew it wasn't great, but I didn't know till a couple years ago that we were the worst. Like we are. So it's things like that can open up. Let's be aware. Let's not just assume the, doctors and hospitals have figured it all out, right? Like we birth babies through midwives for thousands of years. Is this really better? And if so, how? And, it's really being able to be thoughtful, go on your journey with it, and then, open yourself to possibilities, right? And things that then, you know, you're not just going through the motions of something or thinking, is this all there is? That's why the subtitle of my book, so the title's Rewrite the Mother Code. The subtitle is From Sacrifice to Stardust, A Cosmic Approach to Motherhood, because I really wanted it to feel like, well, and it is, once you go on that journey, then the possibilities are limitless. Like the universe is available, right? It's depending on where your faith is or religion or spirituality. This can bring you to a deep, personal, expansive space in that realm in a way that you probably might not have thought about before until you go on this journey. So that's what I'm hoping for, is that we kind of bust through some of these limiting aspects of it so we can have a much more expanded experience. And that's going to be different in many ways for everyone. But at the same time, I think there's just some universal ways that we all relate and can experience it.
Absolutely. And I think that you touched upon something that I think I would say not many are willing to venture down this path, and that is that healing journey
Hmm.
because there's so much pain behind it, right? There's so much
Yeah.
experience that sometimes we don't want to opt back to reliving that. But for us to move forward and for us to rewrite our mother code and be that mother to ourselves, we talk about the importance of checking in and
Yeah.
checking in with our feelings, checking in with the hurt, checking in with the anger, the sadness, all the things that we've been harboring in. And I always
Mhm.
say, whatever we hold on to will hold on to us because
Mm.
it's going to hold us back from something, right? So I remember when I had to start my healing journey, it was just so daunting. I remember just metaphorically standing at this cliff, like, do I really want to just plunge right in? I don't know what's down there. It could be like shards of rocks and I could die. And,
Mm.
we can make
Mm.
a mountain out of a molehill just going into those dark spaces. But I think for us to really heal, it's to having that courage and faith is a big piece of it. Again, spirituality, whatever, wherever you are in this walk, to know that there's something good that's going to come out of it. But for us to know the good, we have to overcome. And I think that with confidence builds that resiliency
Oh,
and
yeah.
that strengthens us and strengthens us, gives us the courage to face those dark, not so fun loving areas. But we face that with that courage to overcome our fear and faith
Mm.
over trumps, fear as well. So, what would you say are some of the steps to writing and starting this mother code journey?
Yeah. First step is to know that to have some inkling or listen to some intuitive voice that, mm, I may have a very decent life. Some things might be just fine, but I know there's more. There's something nuggling inside of us to take a step toward the audaciousness sometimes, even when we don't have terrible circumstances, but we know it can be better. We want more. Some of it is just that first step to acknowledge that I'm worth it. I deserve to have the experience that is the most fulfilling, the most meaningful to me. But geez, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get there. So, you kind of have that first realization. And then, from there, whether you, obviously I am, I know you support people like talking, reaching out to someone or searching on the internet, taking some step that opens a door for you or just that exploration and curious gives your system like, ooh, we're going to keep taking steps toward my own mattering, my own desire. And I want it to feel that simple, right? Nobody has to know you're looking. You don't have to have told anyone yet that you might start on this journey, but get curious for yourself of what are all the ways and where the internet can be kind of a beautiful place to do that, right? So beyond that, then, whether you see a course, whether you see a something, whether something sparks you and you go there. For me, then, in this rewriting the mother code, it really comes back to, I've mentioned this a couple times, is the first thing I do when I start working with someone is looking at, okay, what's your current state? What's working? What's not working? Where are my challenges? And then start looking at what do I want? What's my desire? What's an ideal state? I might use the word vision a lot, right? So, what's the quality of experience I want? And, whether it's in a specific arena of my life or, I focus a lot with people around mothering and motherhood. Like, what in that arena, you know, where am I now? What do I want? I work with couples, individuals, it all applies, right? In our area of life. And it's like simple but not easy, right? Every time I give that assignment, I would say 8 times out of 10 when I come back with them, it's like, well, I didn't really work. Didn't have time. Didn't have time.
Although we hear that a
So,
lot with women.
oh, I don't have time. I was so busy. I'm like, I know. But in that process, we get to explore blocks. We get to explore beliefs, what got in the way? What is, how am I wired? What are the codes written in me to believe that I don't deserve? Like, I can't even imagine putting it out what I desire, what I want, because I might not get it. Or I can't, ask for that. So we go through that process. And that's how the journey begins, right? We take one step, something's revealed, we work on it, we have a success. Any success of, putting 2 words on paper is something to celebrate, in this regard. So this process of writing a vision ends up giving us all the data we need of what the blocks, what the pathways, what might my journey look like to achieve this. Along the way, we're going to build in social emotional intelligence skills. So many of us are not tuned in or have so many mistaken beliefs about our emotions as people, we're what ones are okay to have. Most of them aren't okay to have at any large degree, but we want to get reacquainted with our emotions, and that's going to guide us so much. A woman I've done work with and did a coach training with her, Jill Bolte Taylor. She's a neuroanatomist, and I love her work in whole brain living, who's, said we are emotional beings that think. But that's one of the codes we need to rewire because in our culture, we so overvalue thinking and we think emotions are going to get in the way. When the truth is, we actually can't think without our emotions. It's literally physiologically impossible. When people lose their emotional center, you literally cannot make a decision. It's it's not physically possible. So, I know those were a bit general, but I'm hoping that it's what it sounds like is the invitation to just take a step, follow an urge that you have, and then keep taking the next step. And then, of course, we'll add in there, any ways that you can start bringing your emotions online. I give people in an assignment always early on to 5 primary emotions to consider are fear, hurt, anger, sadness, and joy. And then at some point in your day, just review where did I feel each one of those? Where did I have that experience with that emotion? And then, that gets you it's starting to reactivate a muscle that we've let atrophy in a lot of ways. And then we can start expressing them more because that's where our power is. Requisite variety with our emotions is so powerful. It really gives us one of our superpowers that I think particularly as women, there's a way we have access to them that is more natural, just our brain physiology and some of our physiology. We just have been trained that, you know, they're not okay. So hopefully that gives you.
And a lot comes up as you're sharing that because I'm thinking we can get so lost in somewhat of that noise that feels like in our head because we're going through so much where it's like outwardly looking, we got a lot of things on our plates, but inwardly we also
Yeah.
have a lot to I guess process and manage. And it feels like sometimes how do we discern between which focal point do we focus on our external or when to withdraw and focus on those internal things and begin to heal and move forward or even just acknowledge because sometimes we gloss over something that could be really profound and meaningful, but we dismiss it because
Yeah.
we don't think that it's important. And I know you share a lot of this inside your book. I mean, I would love for you just, share a little bit more about what the book is and invite our listeners to where they can learn more about it,
Mhm.
how they can access it, and get their hands on a copy because this is so neat. I mean, today's conversation has been quite profound and there's so much depth through this because I think as women, we are more complex in that sense where we're not just
Mhm.
simple linear human beings that are just
Yeah.
here. We are lovers and nurturers and all the things that we talked about early on and throughout this podcast that I never want a woman to feel like discounted or discredited and feel like she doesn't matter because of the things that she's dealing with or
Yeah.
going through in these different chapters and seasons of transitions of life.
Mhm. No, for sure, Rachel, thank you, and yeah, so we've touched on a lot of the key themes in the book around how we all mother and how do we make mothering a journey that is our own, right? And really soak the juice out of it, right? Like really have this be in whatever you're mothering. I do focus, you'll see, because my journey that I bring in a lot is around my journey around my children, but not just that. So it isn't just for women who are thinking about or have children for sure. And it's something that I really want to use as a bridge for us as women. We need each other. We need to be on each other's sides and we need to, I believe it's going to do just really positive things for our world when we as women see how we're more alike than different and kind of come online to support versus, in a more masculine value dominate kind of where masculine values dominate. It sets up a competition, right? And we end up judging each other. We end up trying to make ourselves feel better for our choices at the expense of other women's choices just to feel a little better about ourselves, right? So I'm really hoping, the book helps break some of those cycles and bridge, but mostly that we find that we can, this is just one more window in, one more perspective in giving us permission to love ourselves, love our life, mother ourselves. If anything, I'd want people to come out of this book is really breaking that paradigm. Just be willing to explore and be curious about other things that we don't even realize are patterns, our belief systems in our cultures that are disempowering us and really look at what it would take to go on that journey for ourselves and then invite them on the journey of some of this deeper work should they choose. In the book you get to window in on what that can look like if you do decide to, but there's a lot of permission to explore it at whatever level you feel safe and comfortable with. In no way did I ever want to write a book of like acting like I know how to do it or there's a right way to do this mothering world. I don't want that at all. I just really want us to realize that it's a sacred gift to be on this earth. This is another way that we can really live as purposefully and meaningfully as we can, and as consciously, right? And aware that we matter and everyone around us does. So the book is available all the places that you can get books, the Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, all the places that Goodreads, all the places people go to look for books, or my website. And I'd love for you to explore my website or find the links to the book there, which is www.drgertrudelyons.com, gertrudelyons.com. And just look around there. I have things about I lead self-mothering retreats, intensives, coaching. I have a podcast also that I'll definitely be inviting you, Rachel, to have you on my podcast. And then, just find all these different ways that we can learn and grow together and experience this life at its fullest together. Right? And that's really what I want. So I would love anybody can, and you can sign up for my newsletter on my website that gives you all the things happening in my world. I don't inundate people with it, but get on my mailing list and you can certainly find out everything that's happening regarding the book and other things that I offer.
That is wonderful. And oh my gosh, today's conversation has been one of my favorites. This has been so good. And of course, you can find all the links in the show notes below. But gosh, with your book and just life-changing, because as you said, you're not putting out this book as the guru guide that says, I figured this out. And I think that one thing that comes to mind is that you're here to empower others. And that's the power that we get to give to ourselves. And so when you get to navigate on this personal journey of self-discovery and learning who you are and the way you mother and all the ins and outs of who you are, that's something that is a gift you get to give back to yourself. And now you get to empower others to do the same. So I just want to thank you for this time here with our listeners, with me, and just being my guest, but more importantly, the gift that you're giving to this world to change how we view ourselves and the way we view mothering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a blessing to be with you.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.